The introduction of the High Republic era has given many avid Star Wars fans a glimpse into the olden days of the Star Wars lore, exploring an era before the Skywalker saga and leaving us to wonder how much extended material is now on the brink of becoming canon. Among the promotional material, we have been able to see an abundance of unique lightsaber hilts and styles, but most importantly, a much wider array of lightsaber blade colors than we've previously seen before. Until now, the standard practices of the Jedi revolved around the common usage of blue and green bladed sabers, with the exceptions of this rule being exceedingly rare. While we've seen the likes of purple, yellow, and other colors being used in moderation, the introduction of abnormal blade colors is usually considered a significant event in the mythos, and the Jedi are more often than not relegated to either blue or green sabers. This leaves us to wonder then, if a variety of blade colors was common practice in the distant past, and it is not unusual to sport orange, yellow, or magenta blades on the regular, then why did this practice fall out of favor over time for the Jedi? What happened to this variety of lightsaber colors? Why did the Jedi get bogged down to either blue or green? And most importantly, did this trend ever make a resurgence? Well, stick with us, weary travelers of the galaxy, and let's explore the evolution of the Jedi Order that ultimately led to these unique blade colors becoming exceedingly rare among practitioners of the Jedi arts. Perhaps one of the most important details to mention is that the Jedi Order is often divided into three distinct eras, and for the purposes of this video, we will be exploring each of them in detail. The three eras include the High Republic era, the Clone Wars era during the twilight of the Republic, and the New Jedi Order following the collapse of the Empire. The most effective contributor to this phenomenon, especially as it pertains to how the High Republic era evolved into the Clone Wars era, was how the dogmatic views of the Force and the Jedi Order evolved and shifted over time. During the era of the High Republic, the Jedi were seen more as spiritual guardians who were more in tune with the Force on a much deeper individual basis. They were distinctly separated from politics and followed their own unique connection and relationship to the Force as a whole, and the manifestation of differently colored lightsaber kyber crystals arose as a result of this. Perhaps the closest we see to this in the prequel era is Qui-Gon Jinn, who avidly avoided the dogmatic practices of the Jedi Order and sought to follow his own path. Except during the High Republic era, the Order consisted primarily of Jedi Knights with a similar mindset to that of Qui-Gon. An individual's connection with their crystal in particular used to be far more intimate and far more individualized, and the Jedi's relationship to the Force was far more complicated than simply being a servant to it as either a guardian or as a consular. As the Jedi changed, so did the color of their lightsabers. The Jedi of this time were more freely allowed to express their beliefs in full range of emotions, and evolve as individual beings separate from the Jedi Order and its views. In strike contrast to this, being stifled from a young age under the Republic's era and the Jedi Order, and this trend interestingly makes a resurgence after the eventual fall of the Order, and its reconstruction under Master Luke Skywalker, but more on that in just a minute. As the High Republic era of Jedi slowly began to succumb to the more dogmatic and strict worldviews, their connection with the Force was stifled as a result of this. They became politicized, got involved in government affairs, and began to restructure their training on a stark moral binary with no room for exceptions or exploration. Rather than seeing the Force as a fluid life form to garner an individual relationship with, the Jedi began to view the Force as a stark dichotomy of good and evil, light or dark, and they began to not only accept that there was only one correct answer, refusing to explore the more intricate aspects of the Force and learn about the will of the Force in its entirety. When Padawans began being taken from young ages, their individuality drastically suffered, as they were never able to grow into the unique individuals that they were meant to become. Their freedom of expression and emotion was likewise restricted, steering them onto a narrow path of service without the individuality that made them Knights of the High Republic, and made the previous Knights so fluid in their practices and open to new possibilities, the Knights of the High Republic. We can't forget that the Clone Wars era very much signifies the end and collapse of the Jedi as we know it. We are seeing them in their end times. These warriors of the High Republic, however, sought to learn, They were far more open to emotional maturity and had a much more complicated view of the universe as a whole, understanding that they didn't have all of the answers and seeking to understand more about the fabric of the universe in which they resided in, a sentiment that would later be shared by Luke Skywalker and his newly reformed Jedi Order. Luke Skywalker preached emotional maturity and an understanding of all aspects of the Force, not just the light and not just the dark, which allowed his Jedi to become far more worldly and wise. He encouraged his Jedi to get married, garner meaningful social and personal relationships, and seek to understand the fabric of the Force and its connection with the greater universe as one complex entity, not simply a tool of service for the Jedi, where the Jedi of the Republic era strictly forbade any emotional attachment. Luke, and likewise the Masters of the High Republic, understood that fluidity of emotion helped the Jedi to form their own unique personality. They had their own wishes, desires, and understandings of the world as a whole without having their goals limited strictly to serving the Force without an understanding as to why. Their attachment as an individual with the Force allowed them to form not only a meaningful relationship, but an intimate desire to serve the Force of their own accord rather than simply being told to do so, and not simply becoming a cog in a machine that left them devoid of any individuality. Interestingly enough, after the collapse of the Empire and the reconstruction of the Jedi Order, the abundance of new blade colors became more common practice yet again, both in Legends and in canon material. In canon, we get to see not only Rey sports a yellow lightsaber in the closing moments of The Rise of Skywalker, but we have seen behind the scenes glimpses at Grogu potentially even doing the same. Having two yellow lightsabers arise in such a close proximity would have been unimaginable during the era of the Clone Wars, seeing as they were relegated to temple guards primarily. As a side note, Dave Filoni even stated that the yellow lightsabers that the temple guards use have been handed down to them as they fulfill their duties, and that the temple guards themselves did not actually construct the yellow lightsabers, but rather they're holdovers from the High Republic era. Due to Luke's teachings of emotional range and accepting a Jedi as a whole being and not strictly a warrior made this possibility come to full fruition. In Legends material, many of Luke's apprentices wield unique blade colors, both Anakin Solo and Jaina Solo sporting variants of a purple blade. Anakin Solo used a violet blade, while Jaina utilized a purple blade, and even Luke's eventual wife Mara Jade has become synonymous with her magenta saber. Other students of Luke's order wielded an array of uniquely colored sabers, including Tione Solsar and her silver blade, and yellow sabers yet again make their reappearance in Legends material, with Ganner Rysode being perhaps one of the most notable wielders of a yellow saber under Master Skywalker. As this range of fluidity grew and Luke was able to learn from the mistakes of his predecessors, he was able to resurrect the old ways of the High Republic and return the Jedi practices to their prime. And this was visually illustrated by an abundance of new lightsaber blade colors that had not been seen for centuries. Rather than simply telling his Jedi to serve the Force because that was their purpose, he encouraged them to want to serve the Force by teaching them how to develop their own individual connection with it. And he taught them how to properly express their emotional range without succumbing to the dark side, unlike the Jedi of the Clone Wars era. This is why, both in the High Republic era as well as the era of Luke Skywalker, these unique blade colors began to make a resurgence, whereas during the Clone Wars era, the colors of green and blue are nearly the only ones we see in all of Star Wars. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this interesting detail? Would you like to see more in-depth look in canon and Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order in the High Republic era? And if so, which aspects of these generations would you like to see explored in a future video? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. May the Force be with you and have a great day.